Hi students, coming to our next topic, that is measures of query cost. So in the previous video we discussed about the query processing. So in the query processing we are just taken a query, that query which is in high level which is a high level query that should be converted into low level language. Okay, so with the help of some translators and parsers, relational algebraic expressions, optimizers, and the evaluation plan and execution engine, we converted the query into desired query. So to convert that query into desired query, we need some measurements. So let us discuss what are the measures of that query cost. So what is the cost that will be evaluated while selecting the best query? So the basic measures for query evaluation, query cost is, first is the disk access, CPU cycles, and the transit time in network. So these are the basic measurements while we are discussing about the query. So if you are taking the query, that query should be evaluated. So before evaluating the query, you have to know the concepts like disk access, means we have to take the measures about the disk access, CPU cycles, and transit time in network. Okay, so actually the CPU cost is difficult to calculate it. Okay, the first point is CPU cost is difficult to calculate. Okay, so normally for calculating the query, the most required thing is the disk access. So we will mainly concentrate on the disk access, how many disk access it is taken to convert the query. Okay, and the CPU cycles means how many CPU cycles consumed to evaluate a query. Okay, if you take one simple query, so how many CPU cycles it is consumed to evaluate that query. Okay, so these are the different measurements we have to be considered. So first, the CPU cost is difficult to calculate. So I say here the CPU speed is normally increasing than the disk speed. CPU speed normally increasing at faster rate. Okay, at faster rate than disk speed. So when compared to CPU speed, disk speed is less. Okay, so here you see the difference. Here the CPU speed is more when compared to the disk speed. So CPU speed is more means here it can execute the query faster when compared to the disk. Okay, so here we can calculate the CPU, means measuring the CPU will take less time when compared to the disk speed. Okay, so here the CPU cost is then, because of this reason, the CPU cost is relatively lower than disk cost. So why it is relatively lower than disk cost? Because CPU is using less time when compared to the disk, because CPU is executing faster than the disk. That's why CPU cost is relatively lower than the disk cost. So within small time the CPU will execute the instruction, execute the query, whereas when compared to the disk. So here we get one conclusion, that is that CPU cost is relatively slower than the disk cost. Now coming to the transient time. So what is this transient time in network? Actually this is primarily considered with distributed or parallel systems. So whenever you are taken the this transient network is mainly considered in the distributed and parallel system. So now it is not that much of important. So if we are taking the normal executions of the query, so this transient time in network will not that much of required for measuring the query cost. So because of these will be used in the distributed and parallel systems. Okay, so now coming to the first, so I said CPU cost is difficult to calculate. So only the main thing what we have to be taken in consideration for measuring query cost, that is the only thing is the disk access. So disk, let us see the disk access cost. Disk access cost. So how we will calculate the disk access cost? There are some measures will be there while calculating the disk cost. Those are, first is the number of seeks you have to be seen, and next is number of blocks read, and number of blocks write. So to calculate the disk access cost, you need number of seeks, number of blocks read, number of blocks write. Number of seeks means, actually seeks is nothing but number of attempts to find that thing. Okay, so how many attempts it is taking. So here the number of seeks, it is actually different in it is different for random IO and sequential IO. So for if you are taking the random input output, there is number of seeks will be different when compared to the sequential IO. So here the seeks is nothing but how many number of attempts that your the CPU disk is taking to attempt, means for the query, to selecting the best query. Okay, now coming to the actually block read and block write, these both are very important for calculating the disk access cost. Normally cost of writing should be always greater than cost of reading. Okay, reading means only once you will read. Okay, writing means it previously it continuously checking one or two times before executing, before confirming, before writing the program. It has to be sure that it is the correct query. Okay, so the cost of write should be always greater than the cost of read. That means, so let us see what are the what is the formulas to calculate the number of seeks, number of blocks read, and number of blocks write. Okay, so let us take number of seeks. So let us, the number of seeks will be represented as capital N. So that should be the cost of number of seeks is cost is equal to N into average seek time. Average seek time. So next, number of blocks read. Read is cost is equal to N into average block read cost. Next, number of blocks write. So the cost of this is cost is equal to N into average block write cost. So these are the three formulas for seeks, write, and read. So actually for these are the formulas to calculate to measure the query cost. So in the disk access, so for simplicity we use number of blocks transfer from disk, number of blocks transfer from disk, and number of seeks as measure cost. Okay, so number of blocks transfer from disk and number of seeks as a measure cost. So time to transfer one block, let us take TT is the time to transfer one block. Time to transfer one block is represented as TT. And coming to TS, let us take TS. TS is represented time for one seek. So now the formula is cost for block transfer plus S seeks. Sorry, cost of B block transfer plus S seeks is B star TT. TT is the time to transfer one block into B blocks plus S means number of seeks into TS, time for one seek. So one seek, one block will be multiplied to the B block transfer and the S seeks. So then you will get the cost measure of the query. Okay. So this is a formula for measuring the cost query. Thank you.